All right, so I'm continuing with my little hot dog speed painting sketch. I have my brush at a 50% opacity, but it's the same brush I've been using throughout. I stay on that tool and I just hold down Option in order to change that tool to a paint dropper. And as long as the thing I'm stealing from is in Photoshop, whether it's something from the swatches there to my right, or whether it's another Photoshop image, which is what I prefer to steal from, I can get the colors I want. See if I can get a nice shadow color for this hot dog. And the colors will surprise you very often. Now, by working at 50%, I can steal from anywhere, and then it layers the color on top. So if I want to get really dark, I can layer it on top, and then I can kind of blend it in with other existing colors. So if I want a little bit of that red in there, I can do that. But I'm not going to do a lot of detail work with this tool. I'm going to narrow my brush before I get into little details of shadows. Now I'm just trying to get some of those hot dog browns in there, and especially getting the midtones to be a little smoother, like I did on the hot dog bun. Throwing in highlights, knocking them back, stealing them again, softening them out. Now the softness of the highlight has a lot to do with how much reflective properties that material has. And this hot dog's pretty reflective, so its highlight is not all that smooth, whereas the bun's gradations are a little bit smoother. So maybe something like that. All right, so now I'm going to punch up some of the shadows around these onions. I have my navigator open here so I can see it from a distance. That will help you see kind of the illusion you're getting by controlling edges and values. I can use those same shadows on the relish a little bit. And I can steal kind of dark green right from my reference as well. So notice I'm not sticking to just the local color anymore. Even though I'm sketching, I'm going full spectrum in a lot of these right away, having red in the brown and yellow. Breaking these up. Might even try some of the greens in with the onions. I'll break them up a little bit. And in terms of the little white ruffle at the edge, I can paint that just flat at 50%, and that helps me build up different gradations within those white values. Just the more you paint, the more solid it will get. Kind of outlines everything. Helps it stand out. And I don't worry too much about edges until I'm finishing it off, because you notice you kind of paint and repaint edges all the time with each paint stroke you do. And at first you're very sketchy and loose, and then we're going to move towards being more refined. And you can always hit Command Z to go back. If you need to go back multiple steps, you can use your history, or you can use Option Command Z to walk back multiple steps. Okay, the nice thing about putting this all in a sketch layer that's on top of gray is then if I change to a separate tool than the brush, it will usually be the eraser. And on nicer styluses, this will just be the back of the stylus. But I'll use usually a pretty sharp eraser, pretty large and pressure sensitive, so that I can cut out hard edges. So like for this wrapper, I can kind of cut out these triangles now. Clean up certain edges, and that background just shines through. Because even though my brush is not a softened brush, it's a very diffused brush. And it's always good to start with hard edges, because it's easier to soften an edge than it is to crisp it back up. But the eraser is one way that you can kind of clean edges back up if you need to. But notice you can't be very sketchy when you're doing that. You have to be more defined. Okay, then I go back to my brush, same old thing. Steel colors, paint it in. Now I'm ready to go for a slightly smaller brush, I think. Just take it down a little bit, put its opacity up pretty at 100% again, and I'm going to do a new layer on top. And this time, I'll put down the flat colors for the condiments. These are little kind of final touches, special effects, like the ketchup. And you decide how much you want to match your reference. I'm not sweating it too much. But when you're doing a caricature of a human face, placement of these things is everything, which is why you might want to do more of a sketch beforehand. And the mustard, just 100% flat on top. Not on the same layer as my sketch, on top of it. This is how I would do kind of facial hair on a caricature, or glasses, other things that kind of sit on top. Just 100% flat color first, then it can be modified. And I can see now that my little navigator painting is looking very good. Like I have the right colors, the right values. It's just a little blurry. It's like an impressionist painting of a hot dog at this point. A little fast and spontaneous. Now I can go to about 50% and I can start working on those subtleties within the condiments, the shadows underneath them. Because I'm using a smaller brush, I can make that a lot more precise. And I wish there was a trick for this. This is why you always see these demos sped up, not in real time online. Because it's this refining that takes all of the time. And it's not the most interesting or even talentful part of the process. It takes a lot more talent just to organize everything correctly and see your shapes correctly. And just handle the brush correctly than it does just to keep playing with shadows and refining. But the standard for digital art now is pretty high in digital painting. So it takes a lot of this work. And this is about 80 to 90% of the time spent on digital painting are little accents like this, cleaning up edges, finding the right approach. So now I need a highlight on the ketchup to go with the shadow. And I can just try white, but I'm at a low opacity, right? And that will kind of blend with the red, and then I can work with that color. Steal from myself. Now, personally, I don't like to digitally paint in a photorealistic way. It's possible, but you see, you just get really stuck on these kind of steps. So I tend to like to use more art historical styles and to play a little bit more with it. So I'm going to paint some onions and do a little highlight on the remaining ketchup, and then kind of just clean up some of the edges, and then I'll be done. It'll work. That's what interests me about this little painting demo, And that's how I would approach a caricature or a fast speed painting of anything. I have in the video playlists in the history, I have demos of digital painting that are more photorealistic, more airbrushed looking, smoother, and some that are a lot more expressionistic or impressionistic, abstracted. And I want you to find your own techniques and your own taste for this project. It starts with just finding your subject matter. Now, the hardest thing I think about digital painting, just because not all parts of it are as fun as other parts, is getting an overall finish to it. So whatever you do to one part, let's say like the eyes of a character, you want to bring that same level of attention and finish to every other part. So like this relish in the background, I've really kind of ignored because it's boring, it's not very interesting. But if I leave that so unfinished compared to everything else, it's really going to pull attention from the things I like. So I might even do something a little fancy and pull in some extra color, some blue, to then start stealing from. For my shadows, give me a little bit of a cool temperature in there. Improve on reality a little bit by getting more primary color in there. Help activate the reds and yellows. And then I can always amp up the highlights as well. This relish. And all of this is part of the paper. At the back needs to be really clean. So I'll go to my eraser. I'll just cut it through both layers. So it's a much more improvisational technique than digital coloring, depending on the subject matter, what you're trying to accomplish. Now on this same layer, with my smaller brush, I'll clean up the edges of the hot dog, which isn't quite surrounded by the paper, but it's close. And the smaller the brush is, even if it's this man-made brush, it's one that I did, because it's pressure sensitive, I can get a cleaner edge now that the brush tip is smaller. Oh, but I have this shadow underneath. Can't forget that. So light logic really matters when you're trying to get a three-dimensional illusion. I'm still just at 50%. Painting everything. And then I'm always squinting, I'm always looking at the navigator. If I want these wrinkles in the hot dog, I need to use similar techniques for that. But that's all getting to refinement that I don't really want to spend a ton of time on for this digital painting. And that will do it. So you can kind of paint something in, and then you can knock it back with a low opacity brush. All right. Save my work.